Yo, seeing how you guys really liked the first two videos and you guys requested for me to make a final part including all the remaining characters, I decided to make this video for you guys. Keeping it short, if you haven't checked out the first two videos, you should go check those out, and without further ado, we should get started. Now, as a reminder, in this final video where I'm going to be including the remaining characters, I made sure in the first two videos to include the characters I thought you really needed to learn. So the characters that I'm going to mention now don't have like a very clear way of beating them, but I made sure to at least include one good tip for each character so you guys can take something away from this video. With that said, we're gonna go ahead and start with our first category, the dodge category. These are characters that are somewhat similar to the projectile category that we talked about in the previous video, but this time you really just want to focus on dodging either in general or like try to avoid skill shots, or you want to dodge a very certain thing. It depends on the character we're talking about. Starting us off, we have Aiden. For the most part, Aiden's main thing revolves about landing his E as his main form of engage. He tosses out this projectile and which pushes him in the back, and after he gets pushed back, if the projectile lands on you, he will put a little lightning mark on top of you that he can then reactivate that to go in. So for the most part, if you manage to dodge that projectile, you will be able to avoid him getting in. Sometimes though, he will start the engage with his ultimate, which is that big explosion of lightning, which he can also, if he lands, he can reactivate to go up to it. So sometimes what Aidens will do is that they will start with the ultimate activation, and then they will press E right after they TP into it. So you just want to always make sure to be ready for that E that's coming up. And Luke up next. So Luke is a character that in general plays a lot similar, like Lee said, from League. He has the same Q and he has a lot of the same mechanics. His biggest strength is in his Q that he will use to approach. So this skill shot has like very long range, and if he lands one, even if you dash and you use everything to dash away, he can probably catch up to you by tossing another one. This character can also ward hop and just in general hop to enemies. You want to be making sure that you are always looking at where he's standing so that you can try to dodge his Q. While it is a very long projectile, it's not a very fast traveling one, so you should have time to react and dodge it accordingly. Next up, we have Haste. For Haste, the biggest thing is going to be in her ultimate, her rocket launcher. This ability has very little cooldown, and they're usually going to lead the fight with it. So for the most part, whenever you're about to start a fight against a Haste, you should make sure you're dodging the rocket launcher projectiles, since otherwise you're going to get poked out before the fight even starts, which is exactly what Haste wants to do. Once again, this ability has very little cooldown, so she will have it like 2 to 3 times in a fight. Be aware with it, don't stack with your team if possible, since it does pierce through enemies, and don't get poked out by it. The next character that we have Zahir. This character pretty much only has skill shots in his kit, and he's pretty much useless without landing them. Every time he lands an ability, he gets W charges so that he can actually use his W. So pretty much if he never lands anything, he never has his W and he never can do anything. So whenever you're fighting him, just focus a lot on your dodging and you should be on a good spot. Next we have Felix, which is a very weird one to have here in this dodge category, but this is for a different reason than the other ones. Whenever I mentioned dodging against Felix, I meant to dodge his engage. A lot of Felixes like to press his ultimate, which then gives him stacks to then gain a knock up on his Q. So then they will ult, and then they will flash onto you, and then they will Q to knock you up, and then they will use their spear skill in order to push you and slow you towards their team. So whenever you see a Felix come up to you and then suddenly ult, you know they're likely to flash and then go ahead and Q to knock you up. So you want to make sure you're reacting accordingly. Because they do have to use their flash, it's completely okay for you to use your flash as well in order to dodge that engage, and then you're in a lot better spot. Similarly, another good option would be to not stack with your team. That way not multiple people get catched by this engage. But it's a very threatening thing that you should be looking forward to. Another character that we have Hijin. Hijin is similar to the ones we mentioned previously. She pretty much wants to get 3 abilities on you, and then that way you get feared. She does this with her entire kit, which is pretty much also all skill shots, except for her ult, which is more of like a spacing thing. For the most part, once again, you want to focus on dodging a lot. When it comes to fighting this character. Her Q, for example, if she actually misses, then she goes on a higher cooldown, whereas if she hits, she's going to be spamming the ability. Anything that you can dodge against her will be a good thing, so you just want to make sure you do it. Next we have Adina, which is another one of those characters that they're all made of projectiles, so whenever you're fighting them, just focus on dodging quite a bit. Some of these projectiles are also delayed, so then you get a bigger window to react and some of them are also more dangerous to dodge than others, depending on the little icon that she's using. But I'm not gonna ask you to learn all the different icons of what they do. But for the most part, she's all projectiles only, so just make sure you're using your feet whenever you're fighting her. Next we have Piolo. So Piolo is an interesting one. So for the most part, the reason I'm gonna mention Piolo for the dodge category, Piolos usually are gonna get really close to you through dashing or using movement speed ups, and then when they're there, they're gonna try to use their E pretty much point blank if they can. That way they don't miss. If they manage to land their E and then the follow up knock up, then first you got CC'd, which is not good. But realistically, the threatening thing here is not the actual CC itself. Is usually Piolos like to run a diamond shard, which for those who don't know is an augment that makes it so that whenever you CC an enemy, you gain a defense increase for a brief moment, which allows you to tank quite a bit of damage. Because Piolos use most of their mobility in order to go into the fight, if you manage to dodge the E, which is his only form of CC, then effectively they no longer get access to diamond shard, which means they're way squishier and you can punish them for it. Next up we have Alex, which is another similar case where it's another character that we have to look out for his engage. Generally speaking, Alex is gonna go on melee form, dash up to you like so, and then he's gonna swap with his melee swap, which is a taunt, while he then starts his combo. So whenever you see an Alex dash up to you in melee form, he's gonna go ahead and put out his taunt, so you should watch out for it. It's his main way of engaging. It's not a very long taunt, but the follow-up that he's gonna throw after you, it's gonna slow you and deal a lot of damage, as well as his team could potentially follow up. So you wanna be very careful whenever he dashes onto you because of that taunt. You should be careful about it. We have Shukai. So Shukai is an interesting one. So Shukai has his E, which is a dash that he goes towards you. If he lands on you, it will knock you up, which is very bad. You don't want to get knocked up. But the more important thing is after he dashes, he gets access to a second cast of his ability, which will hit the floor in an AoE circle around him. And if he hits you with that, he will defense shred you. If he defense shreds you, he's usually going to follow up by casting his ultimate, which will slow you. And then your defense shred, he's hitting you with waves of damage and also slow you, while his team is also probably going to be able to hit you now that you're getting slowed. So for the most part, whenever you see a Shukai dash onto you, well, you do want to avoid the dash itself, because otherwise you can't avoid the follow-up that's gonna defense shred. You want to make sure, even if he doesn't land a dash, that you're not in range for the defense shred, or if you do get hit by it, then you're not in a position where the rest of his team can hit you, because at the end of the day, Shukai is a tank, so he's not gonna be the most damaged threat that you should be looking to avoid. Last person for the dodge category, we have Martina. So Martina, first of all, she's a weird character that needs to enter broadcast form first. She does this by playing a mini game where she has to take pictures of many different things, objectives mostly. But for the most part, what you need to know is that whenever she enters broadcast mode, so whenever she's actually a real character, her ultimate changes. First of all, the way you know if she's in broadcast mode or not is she will have a red dot next to her HP bar, like so. And then whenever she has that, her ult will transform to this big cone that has a middle cone that if she hits you with it, it will stun you. So for the most part, you don't want to be in the middle cone, right? And that's pretty much it. Don't get hit by the middle part of the thing. The outer edge of the ult doesn't really hurt that much, so just don't get hit by the middle so you don't get stunned. Also, another ability of Martina that people usually get confused about, it's her E. Martina has a dash that will set a location of wherever she started it. She will always have to come back to this dash no matter what, even if she's on broadcast mode or she isn't on broadcast mode. So whenever she dashes like that, don't chase out Martina if you don't have to. You can just wait it out, and then she will have to come back eventually to the initial part. Now, if she's dealing a lot of damage to you, of course you don't want to let her just do damage to you. But I see a lot of people chase her into the end of the world, and then she just comes back into the middle, into the original starting point, and then it's like nothing happened. Don't do that. She will come back no matter what. Category. Next we have our burn category, which I label it this way because these are characters that are similar to our old category from last time, except these are not characters that you should really watch out for their ult, but instead these are characters that without their cooldowns are very weak compared to if they have them. So the first one that's going to start us off in this category is going to be Adriana. Adriana might seem like a character that just always has her cooldowns and she's always tossing fire stuff, but realistically her ultimate works by charges. So she gets to hold up to 3 charges of her ultimate. So whenever you're in a fight fighting an Adriana, if you see her chunking all these charges of her ultimate, she's gonna have to recharge all those charges one by one. So fighting her after she uses those charges, if you manage to reset the fight, will be a lot more beneficial to you, rather if she compared to if she's all stacked up. Next we have Johan. Johan has his ultimate, which is a very big cooldown that pretty much heals everybody around him, and then it increases their defense and all that stuff. 2 things. One, if you have any displacement ability, you can displace Johan during this. He's not immune to displacement. And then second, it is a big cooldown for Johan to use this, and it is a very important ability for him. So if he uses this during a fight, and then you have to reset and you engage again, if he doesn't have this ability, he's going to be way weaker than if he had it. So if you can burn his ultimate, good. Similar, another regen type of ability, we have 11. 11's ultimate makes her heal a lot and regen a lot of HP. So for the most part, if you see her use her ultimate, then burn it out, wait it out, and then you can go in and engage again. She's a lot squishier without her ultimate. She's way easier to kill, so do that. Next, instead of regen, now we have damage. So damaging ultimates that you want to burn out would be Shuichi ult. Shuichi puts a bunch of daggers around him whenever he ults. It's a very easy ult to spot at clear sight. After that, he's going to start dashing between them to do a lot of damage to whoever did it. Whenever you see Shuichi ult, you want to dash out of there. Shuichi's main way of dealing damage is not just go into the dagger and picking it up, but he actually has to dash through you into the dagger to do maximum damage. So if you actually stand away from the daggers, he will lose a chance of dealing a lot of damage to you, and now you're in a lot better spot to fight him. So whenever you see his ult come out, be ready to dash out of it. Next up, we have Nadine. So Nadine has her ultimate similarly. You can see there's aura under her, and then every 3 autos she'll send a wolf to that will deal extra damage. Considering Nadine's usually have a good amount of attack speed, there's gonna be a lot of wolves with every 3 autos. So for the most part, whenever you see Nadine ult and the little aura under her, you want to make sure you time it out and burn it. Nadine also, you want to be watching out for her Q, which is just a projectile, very long range. So whenever you're fighting her, don't get poked out by this. It deals a little damage. Next up we have Estelle. So Estelle, main thing I'm gonna say to time out will be, of course, her ultimate. She can cast it on herself and make this big AOE slow, or she can cast it on an ally, and then she will come flying from the sky and do a big knock up, as well as providing that ally with a lot of shield. So this is a big cooldown and very important for the fight. It can easily turn a fight, but if she uses this and then you end up having to reset, she's now a lot weaker without it. So if you manage to burn out the ultimate, it's very good for you. One of the best ways to make her burn her ultimate is, of course, completely bursting someone. The moment Estelle sees anyone with low HP, she's gonna immediately cast her ultimate, and after that, it's a pretty good trade, or a pretty good way to keep fighting her once she uses it. And then last, for burn characters, we have Fiora. So for Fiora, it's gonna be, of course, her ultimate as well. Fiora pretty much ults, and then she gets 3 attacking dashes, I guess. 3 charges of it, where you can see which charge she's on based on the little color that she has, a little aura around her. Pretty much these do a bunch of damage. So whenever you should see her cast the first one, you want to be watching out for the other 2 and make sure she times it out. You want to be very careful once you see this come out. As you see, if she hits all 3 of the damage, then she'll do extra damage, and she'll reduce the cooldown and stun you. So you just want to make sure you don't get hit by all 3 of these. Okay, next category, it's gonna be a weird one. It's our ADC category. So as we all know, ADC characters are characters that mainly deal their damage through auto attacks, which you would say, well, there's not a lot of outplay potential against this type of character, right? Because they just auto you and then you just die because it's guaranteed damage. But well, this is somewhat true. I wanted to include at least one weakness to each one of these ADC characters, that way you guys had some sort of idea of how to play around them, depending on the character you're playing. But for the most part, it's gonna be short tips. Starting us off, we have William. For the most part, William's biggest weakness is the fact that he can only move by dashing towards his balls. He's very mobile outside of that, especially if the fight has not started. That's when he's weakest. William takes a little bit of loading up, which he usually will do by casting his ultimate. That way he gets 4 balls on the ground immediately. That way he has a lot of places where he wants to move, and then after he catches all 3 of his balls, he will then get to use his Q, which will be a big attack boost steroid. right, that he will get off of it. So for the most part, William is the weakest right before he starts the fight. He needs a little bit to load up, and he also is very mobile without any balls on the ground, outside of having blink, of course. So I would say whenever the fight just breaks out, if you manage to get onto William, that's when he's the weakest. Next up, we have Rosie. Rosie has a lot of mobility in the form of its dashes if she lands her little hits, or movement speed increases. She also has an invulnerability on her E, which she has to target someone for. The main two things I would say that you can punish her with is, one, compared to a lot of the other ADCs, she has a lot of a shorter range. So she's going to be having to be way closer to the enemies if she wants to deal her damage, which means you can probably damage her unlike a lot of the other ADCs. And she's an ADC after all, so she is pretty squishy. So she's going to be up close and you could potentially kill her because of it. And then the other thing I would say to punish, to remove the invulnerability, you have to target this and she will always jump to the other side of the enemy. So while she does have an invulnerability that she will usually use to dodge something, she gets locked in the direction that she's going. So you can always catch her at the end of it because you know exactly where she's going to land, and then punish her off of it, right? Now that she doesn't have any invulnerability. So for the most part, those are the two main things. Punish her invulnerability and punish her range. Now, another character that we're going to cover will be Isol. So Isol's main thing, he's going to toss his Q out, or you're going to have his little bombs that are kind of like Timo shrooms, I guess, but these are very easier to dodge. For the most part, the main thing about these two is that these are considered traps. An Isol trap, Isol passive makes it that if anybody gets hit by a trap, it will defense threat them. So whenever you get hit by Isol's Q and he starts shooting you, this will of course root you, and after it roots you, you're defense threat and rooted. So then you're gonna be taking a lot of damage. So whenever you get hit by this or you eat one of Isol's ultimates, you want to get away from him. You don't want to let him just auto you. You don't want to take any damage while you're defense shredded. So for the most part, if you can dodge his Q and don't hit into his ultimate, or don't walk into his ultimate mindlessly, because otherwise you're just gonna give him a free defense threat. Next up we have Rio. Rio's an interesting one. For the most part, the main thing I can say about Rio for countering her, I guess, would be her ultimate, specifically her shortbow ultimate. She usually uses this in fights to kite away and push her enemy away from her. As you can see, whenever she's in shortbow, which is usually the one they use, it shoots a few arrows first, and then it shoots another one with another recast that will push enemies back. So for the most part, if you're chasing a Rio and she's trying to use this to space away from you, like to push you away, after you see the first burst of arrows, you can try to dodge the follow-up pushback arrow, and then she's in a lot of trouble now that she doesn't have the main way of peeling herself, right? So that's my best tip I can give you for Rio. Next up we have Jenny. So for Jenny, we have, I want to say, two main things about her. One, her ultimate, she puts this big AoE area around her that will slow you, but also if you sit on it, it will charm you at the end of it. So you don't want to sit on it because then you're gonna get charmed. It also, once again, it slows you, so be careful. And then second, it's her passive. So whenever Jenny dies, she actually goes invisible for a little second, and then she will come back with a little bit of HP, right? Which can be pretty annoying. One of the main things that you can do against this ability, if you put a camera down whenever she's dead, invisible, you can actually see her, right? So then while you can't hit her, you can see where she's gonna reappear, and then you can keep track of where she is and kill her again really easily because she has very little HP remaining. So just make sure you have a camera if you're gonna be fighting Jenny. And the last but not least, we have Aya. So Aya is pretty much your simplest to understand ADC. She's very easy to understand, but she doesn't really have that many outplay potential things against her. But the one thing I will say will be her ultimate. You know how we talked about burning ultimates on a previous category? Well, this is pretty much very similar. Whenever Aya uses her ultimate, first of all, it will fear everybody. Also, her ultimate has a set duration. So if you have any sort of like invulnerability or like CC immune or anything like that, this is her biggest way of peeling herself. So if you manage to avoid getting feared by the ultimate explosion, then you're pretty good to just hit her, right? So then this is is once again the one thing that you want to be looking to counter in a way. That way you can go ahead and kill her. And then lastly, just like the last video, any character that I didn't find a particular category that they fit in, I labeled as extra, so I'll be talking about those in any way I can. Starting us off, we have Yuki, which is another pretty simple character. I would say Yuki really doesn't have like any big one counter except for walls. So Yuki's dash, it's one of his biggest things. People see Yuki dashing a lot. His dash is not on a very long cooldown, especially if it hits someone with it, but he cannot dash through walls. So if you have any wall near you or you fight around walls, it will be pretty good to counter Yuki's dash. Alternatively, what if you're a melee character that you just want to deal damage to Yuki? His ultimate is a big thing a lot of people consider when fighting him, but have in mind that whenever Yuki hits his ultimate, he's going to be locked in animation for a very long time. This is also one of his biggest weaknesses. Whenever he goes for his ultimate, you get to just wail on him and just deal a bunch of damage to him because he's locked in animation anyways. So remember, a lot of people try to just dodge the ultimate and that's it, but you can also just trade damage with them, and sometimes that will be worth it if he's not full HP, right? Because you can actually take him out. Then okay, our next character, we have Camilo. I usually compare Camilo to Yasuo from League. So the way Camilo works, and the main thing that you have to be worried about him, first of all, he has a lot of dashes that he will use to get onto you. While doing all of this, he's going to be hitting you with Q. Similarly to Yasuo, his Q charges up to the third one. You can see this by his swords being all light up. And then on the third one, he's going to do the spin that will heal him a lot. It will also drag you in, and it will do a bunch of damage. So for the most part, whenever you see a Camilo and you're fighting against him, you want to make sure you're keeping track of which stack count his Q is, because his Q3 is very important that you dodge it. Otherwise, once again, he's going to heal a lot, he's going to CC you, and he's going to deal a lot of damage. Keep track of his Q, and then you're fine. Next up, we have Lee Dai Lin. So for Lee Dai Lin, I want to say the biggest thing that I see people do is they use a big cooldown against her mid W. So Lee Dai Lin's W, she drinks up, she gets part of her bar. She dodges autos while she does this, and she reduces, I believe, 70% currently. 70% of any incoming damage. So a lot of the times people see like use a big cooldown as she's drinking up, and then it does like very little damage because it's reduced by 70%. So you want to make sure you're not hitting into that. Like, it's very useless. Another thing would be is like, if you can dodge her ultimate, which is will CC you for a while and also do a bunch of damage, especially if you're low HP. But like, it's reactable and you can kind of tell when they're gonna do it, but sometimes they just do it to engage on you, or sometimes it's not always gonna be super reactable, but if you can, you can try. But just mainly just don't hit into the 70% damage reduction. It's kind of silly. Next we have Carla, and for Carla, this character is a little weird, I think, but for the most part, my biggest tip that I can give you against Carla is don't chase her. Carla is a character that shines whenever you're chasing her. She gets to do so much free damage just by you chasing her that it's like not even funny. It's like just don't. Also, don't hit in her ultimate. Her ultimate, well, it will slow you and stuff. If you sit in it, it will push you back and stun you. So don't sit on it either. And as for main peel tool that she has, outside of just chunking you for damage if you do chase her, she also has crossbow skill that will just knock you back to Narnia. So like, if he hits you into a wall, it will also stun you. So once again, don't chase her and don't sit on the ultimate. If she has to walk towards you, she will deal a lot less damage. So Carla is strongest when you're chasing to her. Next up, we have Eva, which is quite the opposite from what we just talked about. Eva's biggest strength is her range. She has a lot of range. She can just beam you from afar and poke you from afar, which is exactly the way you should counter her. The biggest thing you can do in order to counter Eva is she does have to use a resource in order to use her beam and stuff. So she's going to try to poke you from afar as much as she can, because her range, once again, is her biggest strength. Once you get up to her, all she has is blink, and she doesn't really have much mobility outside of her blink. So it's very easy to kill her. So the best way to fight against Eva is just to try to close the distance as much as you can without getting poked out, which sounds pretty hard, honestly. But one of the biggest things that you can do is abuse her laser. So whenever Eva shoots her laser, she's kind of locked in place for a bit. Like, she can't really move the laser that much or that fast. So if you have any sort of quick dash or like you can use your blink in order to close the gap. It could be pretty strong since she then has to cancel her laser and try to get away from you, and then she's in a bad spot, right? So any sort of fast mobility tool whenever she's locked in her laser could be a pretty good way of dealing with her. Next up we have Sylvia. Sylvia's main weakness, I would say, is her predictability and the way she's gonna play. But for the most part, Sylvia, whenever she's in human form, she's just gonna stay in the distance and try to heal her allies and then slow you with her W. So she's gonna be doing that for a bit, and then she's gonna go on her bike, right? And then she's gonna go in and combo you. After she combos you, Sylvia does have a fuel mechanic that she has to care about, and whenever she's out of fuel after using her abilities on her bike, she's gonna go back in human form in order to regain her fuel. So she's gonna be human, then she's gonna go bike, do her combo, and then back to human. So her gameplay is pretty predictable in the way she does her rotation. So that's when you can sort of punish her. I see a lot of people try to hit her when she's on her bike. That way they don't get damaged as much because the damage combo is on the bike. But I found a lot more success whenever I would wait for her to be out of the bike, right back to human where she has no fuel, and then just hitting her really hard right after. Since she really doesn't have an option of not going back into human form. She also has increased defense when she's on the bike, so that's another main reason why not to focus on her that much when she's on it. But yeah, I would say her predictability is her biggest weakness. Next up we have Irem. So Irem is an interesting character. A lot of people get confused on the way this character works, but for the most part, she's gonna be trying to hit her Q from afar in order to hit you with a mark. Alternatively, she can use her dash in cat form and then auto you, which will also mark you with a bell. Whenever you get hit by the bell mark, she can then go on cat form and hit you with the cat form Q, which will then do a lot of extra damage and I believe slow you or root you. I think it's slow. It's a very strong slow. So for the most part, try to avoid the Qs as much possible, and whenever you see her dashing human form, know that she's gonna go hit you with an enhanced auto and then try to go in as cat right after. So be very careful with the bell mark above your head if she hits you with any of those. And last but not least, one of our more recent characters, we have Arda. For Arda, I'm gonna say two main things about him that you should watch out for. One of it is her E. It puts this two like rocks monolith, I don't know what you want to call it, but for the most part he's gonna be putting the two monoliths or whatever, and he is able to make his team go through it and TP through them. So whenever you see one of those and he places both of them down, be ready for his whole squad to just show up and, you know, go through the gate or the little monolith or whatever. So if you're like an ADC or anyone that you don't want anybody near you, just be ready for them to pop out of the gate. That's one of the big things. And then the other one will be his cube. He's gonna put out this cube and you don't want to sit on it. It does stuns multiple times if you sit on it. So whenever he places that thing down, you want to get out of it and you don't want to be in it. That's as simple as that. But yeah, that was our last character, Arda. Once again, I know this video is not like do or die type things, so like the previous two, but I think I at least managed to cover a tip for each character, which will somehow maybe help you in your future games. So I hope you find anything you learn and anything useful in this guide. And if you did, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for the recent support in all my videos. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.